Vision is hosted by Tom Trento. Tom can be reached at 561-319-5533 or Tom at TrentoVision.tv. Listen and watch every weekday from 3 to 6 p.m. on AM 1470 WNN and TrentoVision.tv. Now, let's get a peek at Tom's view of the world. Here's Tom Trento.
Hey, okay, you guys are here. Good. You got to show me how to put that on in the event you don't make it back from one of your breaks. Because we don't want the people not seeing the sausage being made here by any stretch of the imagination. Back at 6 minutes after 4 o'clock on the what's that?
One announcement because
something's not right. Your mic, you're not talking into it or something.
Hello, can you hear me?
No.
Nope.
There you go.
Whoa, now you can hear me. Okay. No, I just want to let everybody know that our telephone number here at the station is 1-888-565-1470. If you need to email Tom during the show, if you're not able to get through on the phone or you're not comfortable to speak on the phone, the email address is Tom, that's TOM, at TrentoVision.tv. So I apologize to the lady I was trying to help earlier during the very quick break, but I had to run to the car to get my phone, and I wasn't able to stay on with you long enough to help you with
Give
your
her all
question.
the details.
Yeah, but please do email us, and we will try to answer your question.
We're so sweet and kind. We're kind here. Unless you're a lunatic, then we have to pulverize your ideas.
Yes, but we would be kind to you before we do that.
Yes, one of the ideas we need to pulverize is Ayman al-Zawahiri's idea. And for those who follow our work, Tom Trento and Trento Vision and the United West, before, let me do a little of our housekeeping. I want to tell you guys because as you guys know, everybody cycles in. People leave work at 3 o'clock. They put the radio on. They get home by 4. Now people are leaving their place. They're going to a happy hour. And we want them to be happy.
Lucky.
So lucky them,
They're so
right?
lucky.
And they're just tuning in, and they're at 1470 on the right-hand side of your automobile dial. Or if you're on iHeartRadio, that is a great application where you can go into that lounge of yours during happy hour. Keep your ear pods in and just smile at everybody like you know what they're talking about. But you're listening to us and learning while you're stimulating the economy. So you can do that iHeartRadio. And we want you to make sure that you set your alarm for 1 minute to 6 o'clock every morning. Wake up, listen to WNN 1470. Brian Craig and Steve Kane. We are the... wow, you guys hear that train coming by? I need a Johnny Cash song. And Steve and Brian, they set South Florida in the right direction with their astute and prickly analysis of the failures of the Obama administration. They may be a bigger thorn in Barack's side than us. I don't know. But they put the thorn in and we pound it in 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So be sure to listen to Brian and Steve Kane. In the morning, you'll get your brain properly pointed in the right direction, and then we'll cap it off for an evening of wonderful national security information, foreign policy, and all the tough stuff made easy in an entertaining way. But as I was saying, the guy we need to deal with is Ayman al-Zawahiri. He is the brains behind Al-Qaeda. And Osama bin Laden was his protege.
Yeah.
Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri is the intellectual mind leader. Was imprisoned by Egypt after Sadat was killed. Muslim brother, Ayman al-Zawahiri. And he's written extensively, and I led off the top of the first hour, the 3 o'clock hour, with a rhetorical question. Can a true believer of Islam, we make a distinction between human beings, folks, who are born into an Islamic family. They may buy it, they may not buy it, they may just put up with it. Some of them want to go to another country and get rid of all that stuff and assimilate. You don't necessarily, because you're born a Muslim, have to follow the Islamic faith. You can convert out of it. You can become an atheist. You can just blow it off. But the true believer, the true believer of Islam, Ayman al-Zawahiri has written extensively on an Islamic doctrine called Wala Bara, Wala Bara, Wala Bara, loyalty, enmity, loyalty, enmity. And I'll just distill it very quickly. And it's fascinating doctrine. It simply says that the world is divided in half. There's the Muslim world and there's everybody else. And on the Muslim side, there needs to be loyalty to all Muslims all the time. And on the non-Muslim side, there needs to be enmity toward all people all the time, hatred. There has to be an aggressive, tangible hatred toward the non-Islamic world, the non-Muslim world. And this further articulates itself in the development of structures, of governmental structures. And in his writings, al-Zawahiri goes and analyzes each structure. When he gets to democracy, he says democracy is paganism because man sets himself up to be the arbiter and the determiner of law. And think about it from their point of view. If in a democracy, a bunch of people get together and say, these are going to be the laws, and they write them, they codify them, they say, okay, now we've written the laws and we have to live by the laws we wrote. Well, al-Zawahiri says, de facto, they wrote the laws. Who are they? They are pagans, because only God can write the law. So he writes extensively, and he leads Muslims worldwide into enmity, hatred for democracy, because it's paganism. It's worshiping man, the lawgiver, instead of God, the lawgiver. So my rhetorical question in the beginning, can a true believing Muslim accept a true Jeffersonian democratic system? And the answer is no, it cannot. Well, then what do we see going on in these Muslim countries? Democracy for the true Islamic believer becomes a process to the Sharia. They want to get to the Sharia, the Islamic doctrine of law. How do you get there? Well, if you got to use democracy and you got to have a vote, one vote, one man, one vote, one time. If you got to do that, you do that. And guess what Dr. Morsi did on Thanksgiving Day?
One man, one vote, one time.
Yep. He said, okay, I now run the show here, guys. Yeah. And the Brotherhood, I just was reading, the Brotherhood is now forming a nationwide march in support of Morsi. It's 1979 Iran all over again. He's going to crush the opposition. And Barry, what do you think our great president is going to say when that happens?
I don't want to say that what your president say is irrelevant in this Middle East because, quite frankly, people get on with their movements irrespective of what the president of the United States says or does. That's the low point in American foreign policy today.
Yeah.
You mentioned about, voting. The difference between democracy and what I call Islamic democracy is that in a true democracy, it's one man, one vote. In an Islamic democracy, as we've seen all over the Middle East, when they are voted, it's one vote, one time.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And from a
talked about, let me just give you another definition of
sure.
The foreign policy under Obama and Clinton. I recall 3 or 4 years ago hearing both President Obama and Hillary Clinton use the mantra, as far as the Middle East is concerned, the status quo is unsustainable.
Right.
You remember that?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It was to promote the upheaval in the Arab Spring, as they threw Mubarak under the bus. I want to tell you, at that time, he was considered an ally of the West and a great stabilizer. And he's a benign leader compared to what we're going to get in the Middle East. We told America at that time, 3 or 4 years ago, that stability in this region is far more critical than changing the status quo. So what's happened with the change in the status quo is worse. You've opened the bottle and you don't know what monstrous evil spirit you're letting out of that bottle.
Yep. No, we mentioned that the other day for sure. Well, let's do this. That was
Let me
me.
know
That was
when.
my mumbling. That was my mumbling reading something. CJ has a question. Then we're going to get into
Yeah.
defining the PLO, the PA, Fatah, all these different groups. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would just like to make the point that this is not unique to any current leadership in Israel or any current leadership in the United States. In fact, this whole idealism about democracy was very popular several years ago through a book you probably are familiar with called "The Case for Democracy" by Natan Sharansky, which was a huge influence and impact on George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice, and what they tried to accomplish in the Middle East through Iraq and Afghanistan. And the subtitle of the book is The Power of Freedom to Overcome Tyranny and Terror. Basically saying that democracy will free you, that the belief that everybody does really want to be free and they just need to be shown how and given the opportunity to know how, and then they will give up their tyrannical and terrorist ways. I completely disagree with with that point, and I think that events that are playing out now in the Middle East will bear that out. What do you think?
I mean, look at what's happening in the Middle East. What's happening over here is not replacing tyranny with democracy. It's replacing tyranny with tyranny.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was a believer, and I still am a believer in the fact that on an individual, on a micro level, on an individual level, there is this spirit of freedom in every human being, and for a lot of reasons. So primarily as a theological reason.
I was going to say theologically for you.
There's a theological reason that every human being has the Spirit of God in them.
Yeah.
And but that can be so suppressed and compressed by a belief system that it can't be seen anymore. So to construct a civilization based upon a theory that's unique for an individual is the mistake.
Right.
And I was a believer with let's bring democracy to the Islamic world.
Right.
And because I've spent a lot of time studying the tenets of democracy and the freedom.
Right.
But I am now convinced over the past 8-10 years that a true Muslim believer you cannot as a corporate structure bring democracy to them. They don't know how to handle it. They don't want it. It won't be taught right.
Look at the change in time from, go back 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was, when we saw, all around the world, all those purple fingers held up in the air from Iraq. I mean, they went to the polls for the first time in 30 years. They really thought they were voting themselves in democracy. And what's the first thing they did? Incorporate Sharia into the Constitution.
Right in the Constitution.
Did they welcome Israel to the member of to be a member of the Middle East? No. I mean, was there anything democratic about what happened with them? What did they do? They aligned themselves with Iran against the United States, and they're going to be even more repressive towards their own people now than they were under Saddam Hussein.
888-565-1470 if you want to jump in. But Barry, let's do this because this democracy thing is just so wonderful that we built after the League of Nations fell apart. Actually, go back to Immanuel Kant, the philosopher who came up with a theory of all this whole freedom theory, that all men can be civilized if we all just get around a table and talk about it.
Yeah.
Sounded great. The League of Nations came out of that. That kind of fell apart after World War I. And then the United Nations popped up, and we have 193 nations. We'll all just talk about it. The United Nations is an effort to keep everyone civilized at the table and maintain peace. Tell us, though, what the Palestinian Liberation Organization is all about.
That's not what the UN is about, that's for sure.
No, but the UN recognizes the PLO as a a legitimate
The
entity.
UN is a corrupt international agency feeding
Yes.
off the American taxpayers and an excuse for a
25%.
party for all the repressive dictators and their ilk all over the world to come
Yep.
to New York and have a party. And
Yep.
basically that is it.
And we pay 25% of the bill.
And we pay the bill.
Help our viewers and listeners understand the PLO. What is that all about?
Well, no, I hear what you're saying, Tom and CJ, but I want to tell you one thing. I've now become a firm believer that whenever you create an artificial entity, an artificial state in the Middle East, it never works. It goes back to an Englishman and a Frenchman called Sykes-Picot who divided up the whole of the Middle East after the fall of the Ottoman
Right.
Empire with a ruler without any sensitivity to the ethnic, tribal values of each of the area. You're getting this with the Palestinians as well. Whenever you have an artificial sort of entity created, they can try and patch up whatever false history and heritage the Palestinians want. You know, it ain't going to keep them together, and you can see it falling apart. You see Libya falling apart. You see Syria falling apart. You see Iraq falling apart. And I would suggest you have a friend of mine, Moti Kedar, Professor Mordechai Kedar, because I'm writing a large article on a theory that he has that really, if you want peace in this area, especially with the Palestinians, you have to get rid of this corrupt, brutal, artificial leadership, this nationalism that's imposed on people, and get back to basics. And the basics is actually looking at the native inherent constituency of the people, which is still tribal. And as an example, Kedar gives as an example, with all the upheaval on the Middle East, there's one area that seems to be peace and tranquility, and that's the Emirates, United Arab Emirates. And why aren't they killing each other, and why aren't they participating in the Islamic winter? Basically, it's because they respect each other's tribal borders. Each place is a city-state or a small state that has been built on the basic of the Arab people, which is tribalism, their ethnicity. And that could be applied as an alternative to a failed two-state solution. We've got time on our side. Doesn't matter what Mahmoud Abbas does tomorrow. There ain't going to be a two-state solution. With even, let's say, the best will in the world of the people in Israel that says, okay, if that's what they want, to get them off their backs, give them a two-state. It ain't going to work because they don't want a two-state solution.
Well, yeah,
No, they want a one-state
Time will
solution.
tell that actually, if you come down to basics, even in the Palestinian-controlled areas, the basic thing is it comes down to tribalism. In Hebron, for instance, there's the Jabari tribe. Have Kedar on, he'll tell you Tulkarm, Nablus, all these areas have their own Hamulas, their own tribes. And if you construct a future for the so-called Palestinian Arabs and Israel, I want to tell you, I've looked into it, I've questioned it. I'll be meeting Moti Kedar again on Friday for a working breakfast to ask him more probing questions. But, you know, it starts as an idea today. Certainly we don't have the nuts and bolts. Certainly we don't have people on board because we haven't reached out to people. But I'm now going to expose to you and through you, your listeners and the viewers, that with all the best within the world for this two-state solution, you know, how many more decades have got to go by? How many more billions of dollars are going to be pumped in these corrupt and brutal regimes that are leading the so-called the Palestinian Arabs before the world will wake up? It ain't going to work. So you have to have an alternative.
Yeah,
and a one-state solution isn't an alternative either.
Well,
so you go down to basics.
Nothing's working, and we know, I mean, because there are no legitimate solutions out there, many of the diplomats and many of the world leaders default to two-state. They don't even know what it means, but they always default to two-state.
Yeah. Which we already have. It's
Those
called Jordan, right?
Shall I tell you something significant about tomorrow?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mahmoud Abbas at the United Nations. You know what the date is tomorrow?
Yes. It's the date of the
29th
British
of
mandate. Yeah.
November.
Yep.
The 29th of November was the date of the partition plan at the United Nations in 1947,
Yep.
which the Jews accepted and the Arabs rejected. So tomorrow at the United Nations, you're going to have an increase in the status of an Arab-Palestinian state that still rejects the notion of the Jewish state of Israel.
That's amazing. I know. And that was what? Resolution 181, I think, correct? Back then, yes. And the whole... this is huge, this whole subject. That's why we're bringing it to you, folks. 26 minutes after 4 o'clock on the East Coast. Tom Trento on Trento Vision. Our guest is an Israeli national security analyst, Barry Shaw. He's been on several times, bringing us up-to-the-date information. In particular, we're discussing the events in the United States tomorrow in New York City at the United Nations, where the General Assembly of 193 countries will push a little lever, push a button, and vote yes to make the Palestinian Authority a unique status of magical, you're a state, you're not a state, but you could be, but maybe you're not. But as long as it screws the Jews, we like what it is.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Barry, you're Mortimer Kadar. Mordechai Kadar. We actually have him scheduled for February 11th. He's going to be in the United States. He'll be in our studio here. So that's going to be great.
Getting to talk about his plan, which was originally called Eight-State Solution, which he's now calling the Palestinian Emirates.
I read it when it was the 8-state solution, and it's fascinating. Hey, look, nothing's working, so God bless Mordecai for throwing something out on the table that can be considered. And, you know, he's a powerful intellectual. He's on the talk shows all the time. And
I've read a lot of his
does
articles.
A phenomenal job. But for our folks here, we have a large Jewish population and, a bunch of younger Jewish kids who may not know all these terms. Let's walk through the history of, and quickly we have to do this, obviously. 1948, the May 15th, there's a state of war from that day to this day. But in 64 or so, I believe the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, came to be. What is that, and what was the purpose of that, and what does it do today?
Basically, that was a creation after the Arabs, we talked about the 1947 partition plan, which was supposed to divide up the area between the Jewish state of Israel and an Arab state. Notice I say an Arab state, not a Palestinian state, because there wasn't any Palestinian state over there.
Right.
Which the Arabs rejected and immediately went to war against Israel and lost. And they lost further wars. And it was really into the 1960s that they redefined the conflict from the Arab-Israeli conflict into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And they had proxy Yasser Arafat, who was looked on as sort of a revolutionary figure, when actually, if you look at Arafat, he was the first Islamic arch-terrorist.
Yeah.
Everything he said was couched in Islamic terms. Martyrdom, everything. And it was the Palestinians that brought us plane hijackings, and you guys in America know the result of that, suicide bombers, an all wonderful contribution to mankind that they've brought so far. Instead of doing what the nation state of Israel started to do or tried to do since 1948, and that was to get on with their farming, get on with their industry, and spend all their efforts in creating a state. If the Palestinians had done that by recognizing the Jewish state of Israel, by getting on with their development, instead of getting on with conflict, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. What we've got at the United Nations tomorrow is another redefinition of what Abba Eban, a previous Israeli diplomat, said famously: the Palestinians never miss an opportunity for missing an opportunity. And that is the sad fact of the Middle East.
Well, their opportunity is not for personal development and statehood. Their opportunity, their goal, their reason for living is jihad against
Enmity.
Israel and
Yep.
the Jewish people.
Constant
And
hatred.
if people would just recognize and accept that in Israel and in America and in other places,
But
then
that-
they would get it.
But that's so inconceivable to the Western mind that a human being is in a constant state of enmity, of hatred toward another human being. We don't even think that way in the West, yet that's the doctrine of Sharia Islam, of Middle East Islam.
That's who they are. They're not about freedom. They're not about personal growth, development, whatever. They have no interest in creating a state. You give them Gaza, they burn down the greenhouses. You give them, Ramallah, and what do? They turn it into rubble. They steal from their own people. They loot from the UN, the United States, everybody else. I mean, they don't build anything. They're all about
basically,
destruction.
The sad, depressing thing is, if you just look at a few of the things that are happening this week, you can see how far removed they are from peace and recognition of Israel that will bring peace and bring some satisfactory conclusion between the two parties. We've got this thing that I mentioned before about Arafat, who's had his body exhumed so they can dig it up and hopefully find some sort of polonium or polony or whatever, so that they can carry on accusing Israel of poisoning their leader. There's a chant that's going around in the last couple of days since they exhumed his body and took samples from it, that they believe that the Jews poisoned Muhammad, and they did the same to Yasser Arafat. He said, I want to die as a shaheed, so now belatedly they're trying to prove that their leader died as a holy martyr.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we have now with the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
You're going to hear tomorrow Palestinian diplomats saying we had no choice because the Israelis wouldn't negotiate with us. Really? For 4 years, we begged them and pleaded with them to come to the table and sit with us. And Mahmoud Abbas rejected all pleas. And I want to tell you, in my opinion, President Obama bears quite some responsibility for putting Mahmoud Abbas up the tree, for which he hasn't climbed down yet. He's getting into an agreement with Hamas, an Islamic Muslim Brotherhood terrorist organization. And now tomorrow he's got a unilateral move at the United Nations that flies in face of all existing signed agreements between them and Israel. So instead of getting on with the peace process, he's getting on for more conflict. Because obviously his main aim of doing this is basically, it's irrelevant, but he's going to try and use it to use channels like the International Criminal Court to bring trumped-up charges against Israel. When will these people get real?
And when will we recognize that the Europeans are not on our side or your side? And look whose side they are taking in this. They are delighting in this. They finally have a chance, all these years after the Holocaust, to vindicate in their own minds what they did to the Jewish people and to justify it to themselves in a legal, international way.
But don't forget the the European Union have their headquarters in Brussels, which belongs in a dysfunctional country called Belgium that hasn't had a government that sit together for the last 2 or 3 years because they can't settle their differences between the Walloons and the Flemish people over there.
Yeah, but one thing they can all agree on is they would love to stick it to Israel.
Well, it's being run by the Islamic world in Brussels anyway, to a great degree. All right, Barry, let's do this. It's 34 minutes past the hour, and the PLO was established. Yasser Arafat was put in charge of that. Let's break down now the PLO, as I understand it, Palestinian Liberation Organization, is made up of 10 or 15 different organizations.
Different wings, yeah.
Yeah, and now where does Fatah fit in, and the PA, the Palestinian Authority? Let's help everybody understand those historically, and then what entity is in New York? So sort through that for us.
Well, first of all, if I could do a sort of self-promotion here, I would suggest some of your viewers get a copy of my book, Israel reclaiming the narrative, because I give a definition of everything that's going on here. The PLO was created as a fighting force. They called it a liberation organization. But basically, what were they liberating? It was destroying the state of Israel to create a new state of Palestine, one that had never been a state of Palestine before. And basically, when you hear on going back to 1967 borders as if they belonged to a Palestinian state before, no, they didn't. 67 borders was Jordan. And it was very funny that all the time from 1948, during Israel's War of Independence, when the so-called West Bank was overrun by the Jordanian army, you never heard a word about Palestinian independence on the land over there. Nothing. Search your history books. Search your records. You won't hear anything when Jordan controlled all the West Bank up to 9 miles from my home here in Netanya. If I look out of my window, I can see the lights from Tulkarem. And that, in 1948, was controlled by the Jordanians until 1967. That's how close they were to the Mediterranean coast of Israel. Never heard a word from the Arabs, never heard about Jordanian occupation, nothing. It was only when they had a war, 67 war against us, that we won and drove them back. Suddenly you began to hear about Palestinian independence, occupation, PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Total nonsense.
Okay,
And
so
then when we drove out Yasser Arafat, if you recall, and he went over to Jordan, he began to create havoc to the Jordanian government, to King Hussein.
Right.
To the extent
Got
of what's
kicked
called
out of
Black
there.
September,
Yeah.
when King Hussein booted out, after battles and bloodshed in Jordan,
Yeah.
and Amman, booted them out to Lebanon.
Yeah.
Where in Lebanon, they disrupted the Lebanese government and created havoc from there, an attack on Israel. And you may remember that Israel had to go into Lebanon in order to drive out Yasser Arafat and the PLO, who then found refuge in Tunis.
what a mess.
And eventually they decided through pressure to create a Palestinian state, a Palestinian entity. And we were encouraged and pressurized even by the American government to allow Yasser Arafat to come from so-called exile in Tunis
Right.
back into the areas over here, into Ramallah, so we
Yeah.
could create an autonomy that would lead to a Palestinian state.
Right.
What a great move.
And,
So-
and Yasser Arafat signed an agreement saying that he would put aside terrorism and violence and do state building. And you remember the signing of the Oslo Accord on the White House lawn with President Clinton, Rabin, and with Yasser Arafat.
1991, yes.
And as soon as he got
91,
back, he
93,
started what
93.
we call here the first intifada. In other words, from the Palestinian territories that were given to him to operate and create this as a model, he started killing and using his terrorism and his suicide bombers and his violence against innocent Israeli civilians, which was followed then by the second intifada.
Hang on right there, Barry. Hang on right there.
The,
This is a walk through, a run through Middle Eastern history.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Do we have a caller? Somebody?
yeah, yeah, we
If
do.
you wanna come
Just
up- if you want to come more up to date,
Yeah, hang on.
yeah,
We-
just
we
give
got a
us one
call.
second here. Yeah.
President
Hang on, Barry.
insisted that Israel allowed the Palestinians election to show, that they could democratically choose their leader.
Hang on
Right.
for that. I don't want to get into that yet, but we have a.
Yeah,
I think-
just real quick,
somebody
just
call?
one quick point, and then we'll go to a caller. Just the Fatah is the political party, the main political party in the Palestinian Authority that, theoretically Mahmoud Abbas is the head of that party, and that used to be the majority party in the areas of the Palestinian Authority, and that's why that's the lead party of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is the fake government created by the Oslo Accords, And the leader of
But
that
Fatah
party, and
is
the
big
leader,
party of the majority
Yeah.
of the Palestinians, according to their vote in 2005.
right, and the leader,
Hamas won that with 64%.
yeah. And so the leader of that party is the international representative of the Palestinian people when he goes and travels around the world and goes to the UN, et cetera, et cetera. And we do have a caller.
But hang on. If you introduced
Yeah.
Fatah,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. Fatah is an acronym, and an Arabic word. It means the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, right? But in reverse, you take the Arabic letters in reverse. Mm-hmm. So movement, liberation, national Palestine. But in Arabic, in reverse, it spells F-A-T-H, Fatah. Good so far? Mm-hmm. Well, Fatah also means victory. The word means victory. Mm-hmm. And it's also a religious discourse or decree for expansion, for Islamic expansion. So the word Fatah means Islamic expansion. Not done yet. They didn't
Right.
pick this by mistake. You know what
Right.
else it is? Listen to this. This is amazing. It also is the name of the 48th surah, the 48th chapter of the Quran. The 48th chapter of the Quran is called Fatah. Guess what's in the 48th chapter? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Hudaybiyah Treaty, which Yasser Arafat
Yeah.
said with the Oslo, that's why he could sign the
Right.
Oslo Accords. Now,
Right.
for our listeners and viewers,
Yeah. Explain that. Yeah.
Mohammed was going to fight the Meccans back in the 7th century, and his army just wasn't strong enough to defeat them. Hello, Hamas, the other day, and so he called for a truce, a ceasefire. And the name of the ceasefire was the treaty, the Treaty of the Hudaybiyah Treaty, and that activity, you emulate in Islam what the Prophet has done. The Prophet saw that he couldn't defeat the enemy; he wasn't strong enough, so he formed a treaty, a 10-year treaty that he can break anytime he wants to.
Right.
And Yasser Arafat justified signing the Oslo Accords to the Islamic world, because they were supposed to be in a constant state of war.
Right.
He said, "Hey, I'm following the Prophet in Hudaybiyah, the treaty," and that whole thing comes back to the name Fatah. It's a fascinating piece of
Wow.
etymology of. But let's go to the call.
Yeah.
Wait, hang on. We're going to go.
Just read you a little bit from my book, Israel Reclaiming the Narrative, and I'm going to read you just a small part of Article 20 of the Palestinian National Covenant. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Not Hamas. This is the so-called moderate Palestinian Authority. Okay? Article 20. Claims of historic or religious ties of Jews with Palestine are incompatible with the facts of history and the true conception of what constitutes statehood. Judaism, being a religion, is not an independent nationality, nor do Jews constitute a single nation with an identity of its own. They are citizens of the state to which they belong. Now, won't you find this racist? And this is the entity that the United Nations tomorrow is going to increase their status.
Unbelievable.
And they say, in insult to the United Nations, Article 19 of the Palestinian National Council about the United Nations, the partition of Palestine in 1947 and the establishment of the State of Israel are entirely illegal, regardless of the passage of time, because they're contrary to the will of the Palestinian people and their natural right to their homeland, and consistent with principles embodied in the Charter of the United Nations.
Yeah, these people live in a parallel
the
universe.
United Nations tomorrow, and the United Nations are going to bless them.
Yep. No, it's the world is
This
upside down.
Insanity.
Well, this is the same United Nations that had Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Muammar Gaddafi on the Human Rights Council. So who do we have on the line? Somebody wants to talk.
We have Rich in Sarasota.
Hey, Rich, you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Rich.
Oh, it's Dr. Rich.
Yeah.
How you doing? You're on with Barry Shaw in Israel.
Well, I know him. I appreciate Barry. It's very wonderful. I will say I will have. I had a wonderful conversation today with a very good friend of mine who is a trusted source from BESA, which is the think tank, the Begin Sadat Strategic Studies Group up in Canada. And I asked him two things. I said, is it, given the current situation in the Middle East and what's going to happen in the United Nations on Friday with the Palestinian Authority wanting to seek statehood, I said, is it true in your mind that given the Arab Spring and the rise of Islamist governments around the world, around the Middle East, is in fact the Palestinian-Israeli issue taking a back seat to Islamist government rises in other states like Libya and Egypt and so on? And is that good for Israel? His answer was yes, that's the case, that the Palestinian-Israeli issue is becoming a secondary issue, and that's good for Israel. And I'll just leave that on the table. And then I said, the second thing I said is Israel prepared to accept a nuclear-armed Iran? And he said, absolutely not. I said, what is the alternative? Now, this is going to be interesting, and I'm going to have to get off the phone, but I hope somebody will discuss it. I said, what's the alternative? How can Israel truly make a difference? And he said they will fire a low-yield nuclear weapon or weapons, low air burst, and that will neutralize all of the electrical equipment, electrical grid, everything in the state of Iran. And they said that's the only cost-effective way of causing a regime change in Iran. And I'll leave that on the table for you guys to discuss at will.
Just a little thing like that.
Just a little apocalyptic move like that. Okay.
Yeah.
And it said, yes, the point is, I brought up, I said, Israel, I compared Israel to Germany in World War II and the rest of the Arab world to the United States, in the sense that, Germany had a very sophisticated, well-honed, well-disciplined, well-equipped military, and the United States was unprepared totally for the Second World War. And what we had, though, was the greater numbers and the greater manufacturing capability. So even though we didn't have a prepared army, nor do we have a very sophisticated air force like the Germans did, we were able to basically wear them out. We kept throwing planes and bombers and crews and soldiers at them, and we could take the higher casualties and lose more equipment and than Germany. And eventually we bled them dry in terms of their capability of replacing their military capability. So Israel is in a similar situation in the sense that while it has a very sophisticated and totally probably the best military in the world, an air force in the world, it can't look, if each one of those missiles for the Iron Dome costs, say, $45,000 each, eventually you run out of missiles, and eventually you run out of money to buy the missiles and the capability to reproduce them.
Yep.
So they've got to do something that's cost-effective.
That's why Israel, look at the history of Israel and the wars imposed on Israel. Israel has never fought a prolonged war like you mentioned about World War II. Six-Day War, for instance, there's a limit to the sophisticated weapons that we have, and we're always dependent on America to resupply them, and there have been one or two times in history when the Americans held back. We hope that won't happen if it comes to a conflict with Iran. But further to what you were saying about the strengthening of the Islamic regimes in the area, just some also breaking news for you. The Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan and Khalid Mashal of Hamas are going to visit Gaza next week.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So here we have a tightening of the noose around Israel, where you've got Morsi, you were talking about, the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. You've got Erdogan, who wants to also see himself as a kingpin of the Muslim world in the Middle East, linking up with Khalid Mashal of Hamas, visiting Ismail Haniyeh in the victory lap in Gaza. You know, it's and then also Iran waiting in the wings to, you know, making sure they're still involved as well. And all these people together are doing it for one thing only, and that is target Israel.
Absolutely. Rich, you still on the line?
Yeah, I am. I'm having a little difficult time understanding Barry, but I think look, I think these are very troubling times. I think that that it's a time that perhaps drastic measures are going to be taken. With the strengthening of the Prime Minister and the Likud party, based on the most recent data that we have out of Israel.
Yeah.
Israel is not going to
Rich,
accept
I think one of the things that coming out of this week in Israel, that the primaries for the Likud party has certainly swung more to the right. As we speak tonight, the primary is going on for the Labour Party, but it's quite clear that there's going to be a right or centre-right bloc in the next Israeli parliament. And I'm not surprised, because basically with everything going on around us, it's sort of round up the wagons, it's Fortress Israel time.
Israel moves to the right, and the United States moves to the left. How very interesting. Rich?
The difference is the distance between Washington and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. You know, we live in a very, very threatening and dangerous neighborhood here. Yeah. Like I said to you, I'm 9 miles from Tulkarem, where Obama would want to give to a new Palestinian entity. And what happens tomorrow when Hamas takes over from a weakened, failing Fatah leadership?
Hang on, Barry. Barry, hang on.
Neck of the woods. This is no time for Israel to make fatal gestures on the altar of a failed two-state solution.
Yep.
Yep.
Hang on, Barry. Hey, Rich, I'm going to let you go, and then we're gonna wind up with Barry here. Thanks for calling in. I'll pick up on the EMP concept with Barry. All right, Rich, take it easy.
That was Dr. Rich Swire from WatchdogWire.com. That's WatchdogWire.com.
I think
really, really good.
I think it's really WatchDogSwire.com.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Watchdog Swire.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, Barry.
For Israel.
We only got about a minute left, Barry. Rich, the gentleman who just called, does a lot of work with us. He's a retired lieutenant colonel, 24 years in the
Good guy.
U.S. military. Yeah, great guy. Why don't you? And he said that he got some intelligence from a think tank that a low yield nuke, which is an EMP, electromagnetic pulse bomb, ignited in the atmosphere.
I haven't heard that, but basically, if we're going to hit Iran, it could well be from an unexpected direction. And there's a lot of sense, if you recall, what the King of Saudi Arabia advised President Obama, cut off the head of the snake when he was referring to Iran.
Yep.
What did that mean? Is basically targeted assassination. Get the Ayatollahs. If you get the Ayatollahs, and either Israel or America alone or together target all the ammunition dumps, all the radar, all the barracks, all the headquarters of the Revolutionary Guard, you don't even have to touch the nuclear facilities, because once you decimate the leadership and their military support, that allows the people to rise up. And I want to tell you, we spoke before about the upheaval in the Arab street, but I want to tell you, if there's one place in the Middle East that an upheaval in the street will lead to a secular government, this is definitely going to be in Iran.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
We've
the Americans
talked about
and the
that.
Europeans failed last time the people rose up. They could use this opportunity to lay down on the military background and the strength that they've got and leadership to allow the people to take over that country. And
All
you
right.
can even leave the nuclear facilities in place, because the secular revolution that would happen in Iran, they would then turn to the West and say, come in, take out what you don't need. We just want a civilian nuclear facility, and the West would provide it.
All right, on that note, Barry, we got to let you go. We're out of time. We really appreciate you spending
Thank you so much.
this time with us this evening.
Thanks for having me on for a marathon. And
I gotta
look
get your
forward to
book.
talking
Yes.
with you perhaps sometime after the decision at the United
Sounds
Nations
good.
tomorrow.
Sounds-
And where Israel goes from here.
All right,
Okay.
we will do that. IsraelNarrative.com, Barry Shaw. Thank you very much. We're going to come back in the next hour. You and I, CJ, we'll open it up for calls, and we'll sort through all of this, put all the pieces together, make a lot of sense out of it, and rock and roll.